Hi, welcome to the Come Off Conqueror show. I'm your host, Bonnie, and today's episode is all about sexual assault and sexual abuse and rape and date rape. And we're going to define those terms to help you understand what those things are and what the differences are between them. I get asked that question a lot. Is what happened to me rape? Is what happened to me sexual assault? Is this abuse? Is this not abuse? Can I prosecute? Should I report this? I can't even tell you how many times I've been asked if what happened to me was actually rape, or if just lots of different questions surrounding what is sexual assault and what is the difference between that and abuse and these different things. The terms aren't really all that important unless you're going to prosecute or unless you're going to disclose. But I also think that they are important to help you label and to understand what happened to you so that you can process and move past it. So the second half of this video is about the healing and what do you do if you've been assaulted, or what do you do if you've been raped or abused? How do you handle the situation? So we're going to go through kind of the steps and the immediate responses that should be taken after these things happen, in particular, rape. So let's jump into my presentation. I went ahead and made a PowerPoint because I know myself. I know I will ramble, and so hopefully you'll like that. While I'm pulling this up, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, like this video, and feel free to share it. All of you doing those things really helps us spread the good news and help these messages get out with people who really need to hear hope and encouragement and who need to heal. So hopefully you'll help me do that by liking and subscribing and helping share this message. Okay, so let's jump in. What is the difference between sex abuse, sexual assault, rape, date rape, all those things? We're going to define some terms here. And then we'll get into what do you do about it. Now, let me first preference this by saying a lot of this information came from the trainings that I've been to, and the books I've read, and different various websites and resources. I will link to all of that down below so you can get the actual information, get the information from those sites as well. Okay. So first, before we talk about what is sexual abuse, you need to understand that there is a lot of different types of abuse, and sexual abuse is only one type of abuse. There is psychological abuse, which includes emotional and verbal abuse, name calling, gaslighting. What is gaslighting? You've probably, if you're like me, you're new to all this and you're going, what in the crap is gaslighting? That's basically making you feel like you're insane, making you feel like your reality is not reality. So it's basically someone manipulating you and helping you think that what they're doing is not actually happening, or what you think is happening is not actually happening. Does that make sense? It's super convoluted and it's terrible. And I can post to a great video about gaslighting down below. There's financial abuse. Oh my gosh, financial abuse has many different aspects. It's not just controlling your money, but it's controlling the way you spend your money, how you get your money, anything that has to do with money. Spiritual abuse, that is preventing someone to believe their belief systems or forcing them to believe in a certain way. That is also multifaceted. Physical abuse. Now, physical and emotional, psychological, and sexual abuse tend to be the three that people really think of when they think of abuse. They forget about the spiritual and the financial and even the non-human abuse. So that's like abusing animals or being super aggressive with your things, throwing stuff. Something that is still a form of abuse. There is a difference between abuse and neglect, okay? While neglect is still reportable and prosecutable, it's done in a different way. Abuse is really the mistreatment or harming or attempting to harm somebody, okay? Neglect is failure to prevent harm. So the difference is abuse is action and neglect is failure to act. Okay. They can happen at the same time. Often they do, especially in the case of child abuse, but not always. And so today we're just going to focus on the actions. Okay. We're not going to focus on failure to act. We're going to focus on abuse in particular. And that's why I felt like it was important to define that. Here in Utah, where I live, I don't have the stats nationally on some of this, but 1 in 3 women in Utah will experience some form of domestic abuse. Some form of abuse. Half of those, it's sexual assaults, sex abuse. And did you know, this is interesting and really sad, that half of all of those sexual assaults include strangulation. And I'm not going to talk about strangulation today in today's video. We'll do one later, hopefully with some law enforcement, talk about why that's so important. But strangulation has some serious long-term effects. It's terrible. And another statistic that is startling and so horrible is that at least 3 people every single month take their own lives because of domestic violence. Sorry, that's a typo on there, but it is at least 3 people who take their own lives that suicide has to do with domestic violence. And 42% of adult homicides are domestic violence related. So abuse related. Isn't that crazy? Almost half of the reason someone's killed, it's done with in a domestic violence scenario. So what is the difference between sex abuse and sexual assault? Sex abuse really has to do with minors, and sexual assault has to do with adults. Okay. Sex abuse typically happens more than once. It's usually an ongoing thing, and it includes exposing yourself or touching yourself in any sexual way on purpose. An accident, like a child walking in on you naked, does not count as sex abuse. Okay. So it has to be on purpose and some sort of sexual way. It can also include sexual contact, like fondling, touching somebody inappropriately or touching their private parts. Obviously includes intercourse as well. Obscene messaging is included in that sexual abuse and sexual assault. That includes sending text messages or Facebook messages or contacting them in some form of electronic way. Pornography or inappropriate language, things like that. Sex trafficking is, of course, included in that. And viewing or participating in the creation of pornography is also considered abuse, sex abuse for a child. Okay, so assault is the adult form of this abuse. Okay, it's unwanted or uninvited abuse, sexual interactions. So that means that no consent is given or consent is revoked at any time before or during the action, whatever that action may be, whatever that item that is. Okay. So if consent is not given or taken back, that is still considered sexual assault. Okay. It can happen only one time, and that is considered assault. More than once is usually considered abuse. Okay. There's a great link down. I found this really awesome law firm who has a great article on what is the difference between sex assault and sexual abuse. That link will be down below. Okay, now that you know the terms, it's important to know that 1 in 3 women and 1 in 6 men will experience some form of sexual assault in their lifetime. That is a crazy number. A third of us women will experience some form of sexual violence, whether that's harassment, touching, whatever, we'll experience that. So the big question that I get a lot is, what is the difference between rape and sexual assault? A lot of times sexual assault and rape are used interchangeably, but they are actually not the same thing. Sexual assault is the umbrella term, and rape is a form of sexual assault. Okay. Sexual assault is really any unwanted criminal sexual act. So like the things that we described above, the pornography, the exposing yourself, voyeurism, sexual harassment, things like that. That's all under sexual assault. Rape, however, is any degree of penetration, no matter how slight and how little bit of penetration that object did, whether is considered rape. So that can be penetration, whether that's oral in your genitals or even rectum. Okay. And that is without consent. And it does not have to be a body part. It can be an object that is penetrated. Okay. So that is important to know, because a lot of times people ask, well, was this rape? He used his finger or whatever it is. He used this thing, this banana, whatever it is, right? Like, and then they ask, like, is that still considered rape? Yes, it's any object and any degree of penetration, even if it's just a little bit, it's still considered rape. Okay. If you think about that, it doesn't matter how much penetration happened, there's still trauma, psychologically and physically. And psychologically, that trauma is in some ways more damaging. Some ways. So then the next question I usually get is, what is date rape then? Right? Date rape is a form of rape. The only difference is that date rape has to do with somebody that you were dating, whether someone that you were seeing. And it doesn't necessarily happen to occur on a date, but it's somebody that you've been socializing with and going out with at least one time. Okay. And the other aspect of this definition is that it's anytime the victim does not feel that he or she can safely say no, or they can't give consent because they're drunk, they're high, they're asleep, or anything like that. So it really has to do with consent and knowing the person and dating them. Okay. So it's not rape if you're dating this person and you say to them, yes, I'm willing to go all the way, or whatever it is. Like, that's not rape. You can't decide after the fact. If you said yes and you decide after the fact, that's not considered rape. You have to uphold your consent at some time. So let's get into what is consent. Okay, this consent is a whole can of worms, and there are so many aspects of it. One of my favorite videos and explanations of consent, I'm linking down below. It's the coffee analogy. I love this video because it does explains consent in kind of a funny way, but also in a way that makes so much sense. It's basically like, look at it as if you're asking somebody if they want a cup of coffee, right? And they go into all the different scenarios of when it is and when it isn't consent. It's really good. So we'll link that down below too. My production assistant's going to love me. This video has a lot of links this time. So let's discuss, what is consent? It is clearly and freely communicated every single time. Just because you consented to having sex last week doesn't mean that today they automatically get it. The other thing about consent is that being married or being in a relationship with that person does not automatically guarantee consent. You can be raped by your husband or by your spouse or by your partner. You have to give consent every single time. Okay. How do you give consent? You can do it verbally or with body language. Body language is a little iffy. Verbal is more concrete and more clear. Body language is where things get really gray. Okay. Gray area. You cannot be drunk, high, or asleep to give consent, and you cannot be intimidated or threatened. So for example, intimidation can be a guy that you're dating. You really like the guy and you don't want to let him down. He starts to push you and you're like, I don't really know about this. And you say, I don't really feel comfortable going further. I'm not really sure about this. Or you give any sort of like, I don't know. That is not consent. Saying, I don't know is the same thing as saying no. Okay. Or threatened or intimidation can also look like unequal power dynamics as it's written here. So for example, a student and a teacher, or a coworker and a boss. So your boss making you feel like if you don't give consent, you'll get fired or something like that. Okay. Those sort of things fall under that category. Anytime there's unequal power there, somebody you feel less than the other person, that is unequal power. Okay. And the other thing about consent that's really important to know is you can change your mind at any time during the process. They can start and you be like, we're done. We've gone too far. Even if they've started the whole thing, right? You could be making out and started to go towards that direction. You could even be naked and all that stuff and still say, "Oh, we've gone too far. I'm done." That is, they no longer have consent, right? That's why I love the coffee analogy, because you can start drinking the drink and decide halfway through the drink, I'm done, right? So the other thing that's really important to note here is that your physiological response is not consent. So just because you're aroused, or just because you have an erection or an orgasm or anything like that, your body involuntarily has these physiological responses. You cannot control whether or not you have a physiological response. You can't. It's involuntary. So a lot of times victims think, but I liked it. It felt good. And so if it felt good, I must have given consent, right? No. That is not the case. And a lot of times abusers will use your physiological responses against you. So they'll say, well, I know you liked it. I could tell that you liked it. I could tell that you were feeling good. They'll say things like that. And that does not mean that you gave your consent. That is your body reacting. That is not your emotional and your logical and your brain saying yes. Okay. Please, please, please hear me. I promise you that was not consent. Some more statistics that are important to know and terrible. 1 in 5 women are raped in their lifetime. 1 in 5. That is why it does not surprise me that when I started this project a few years ago, I kept meeting so many women who have been sexually assaulted in some way. 1 in 3 were sexually assaulted. 1 in 5 have experienced rape. This is crazy. And what makes that number even more staggering is the fact that rape is actually so highly unreported that number is wrong. It's probably more like 1 in 3 are raped, or 1 in 4, because of how many rapes go unreported. Half of those rapes are done by somebody that right? By an intimate partner. So somebody that you already are in a relationship with, whether that's your boyfriend or girlfriend or spouse or your partner. 40% of those are by somebody you know. That is crazy. So a lot of people think rape is somebody that you don't know. It's like a stranger. It's being violently caught off, taken off the street, or given a date rape drug, or things like that. No, more often than not, it's by somebody you know. The other sad statistic is that 91% of those victims of rape are women. That's why our support group is so important. And our support group is just for women at this time, because for so many different reasons, but 80% of victims know their abuser. And with minors, it's 93. Whoa. So it's not a stranger. So let's talk for a minute about what do you do if you've been sexually assaulted. First and foremost, I want you to know it's not your fault. You did not invite this. Okay. Even if you felt like you had to give consent, it's still not your fault. You were coerced into this. This is why this is such a gray and such a touchy and delicate subject, because there are so many different scenarios in this situation that it's hard to say, right? But anytime you've been sexually assaulted, it was not your fault. The way you were dressing does not mean that it's okay. The way you were acting, the way you were talking, the way you were singing, the way you were flirting, the way you're doing any of those things, you did not invite this on yourself. This was not your fault. You have nothing to repent of. Okay? In terms of that. The next thing you need to know is that you should get medical care as soon as possible, if it's not too late. Meaning, if you're 16 years or older, you have 4 days to get a rape kit where they can collect DNA to prove whether or not it happened and to prove who it was. Okay. If you're younger than that, 15 years or younger, then it's only 3 days. Okay. So if it's been a few days, go. If you can, if this is immediate, like this just happened, try not to go to the bathroom and try not to bathe before you go, and wear the same clothes when you go get help. The reason you want to get medical care is because they can evaluate if there's any physical trauma to your private parts. Okay. Sometimes, especially if it's been violent, there can be actual trauma to your private parts and to your body physically that can cause serious problems, UTIs, all sorts of things. Okay. So I don't want to scare you, but you need to go get medical help. Okay. Not just because of STDs and things like that, but there can be things that can happen that can go wrong. So please go see a doctor. There is I found a hospital that has a really great article about the rape kits and what happens during an exam. And so I'll link to that down below so you can see what happens during an exam and what to expect. It's a great article. It's very detailed, and hopefully will help you feel more safe about doing that. Okay. You can also do it anonymously. You'll be given a code, a number for your case, so that if you do decide to report later, you'll be able to get that information later. Okay. You do not have to give them your name when you go. Where do you get medical attention? That's another question I get asked. The hospital, any clinic. Planned Parenthood is a place. I'm not a huge fan of Planned Parenthood, but they are really great when it comes to rape kits and helping victims. That's where I went when I experienced my date rape. I went to Planned Parenthood, but I could have gone to a hospital, could have gone to my doctor, I could have gone to women's centers. There's a lot of different places where you can go. I'm going to give you some additional resources here to help you find more places like that. The next thing that I highly recommend doing is getting emotional help right away. Do not wait. I have found that in speaking with hundreds of survivors of rape and sexual assault, that the ones who seem to get help immediately are usually less affected by it. They're able to process and heal so much faster than the people who waited, who buried it, and who decided to ignore it and pretend it didn't happen. Those people tend to have more lasting and more serious effects later down the road. If you've read the book Body Keeps the Score, he talks a lot about that, about how this trauma can rear its ugly head through so many different things. It's not just stress and anxiety and that emotional trauma, but it can physically hurt you as well. It can show up in disease, literally. I have a friend who told me about a story about one of her friends who her inability to leave her spouse showed up in her inability to walk. She all of a sudden lost her leg function. It was crazy. So emotional trauma can show up physically. So where do you get emotional help? you can get a victim's advocate. There's lots of advocacy groups. There's tons of different types of therapists. There's talk therapy. There's EMDR or EDMR. I can never say it correctly. There's hypnotherapy. There's equine therapy. There's so many different types of therapy. And one of the things I love about this YouTube channel and this show is that I interview so many different survivors who have gone through tons of different types of therapy, and they give a lot of different resources and different help. So watch some of those videos and you'll get an idea of the different things that people have done to get help. You might want to get help from a lawyer as well. There are free law practices that do pro bono work to help victims. And you can find that on some of these websites I'm going to give you. Each state has a victim advocacy program and free resources out there to help you. Some people ask if they should go to their ecclesiastical leader. I get asked that a lot, actually. And I think it depends on who your ecclesiastical leader is. If it's somebody that you feel comfortable talking to about this, and sure, go talk to them. They can be a great resource and a great strength and help to you. They can pray with you. They can help you understand the atonement further. If you're Christian, if you're Jewish, they also do some really great counseling and things like that. So it really just depends on who your ecclesiastical leader is. In some churches, it's you can be in really big trouble for being sexually assaulted, and outing the abuser. Like if it's your dad or something like that, there can be serious repercussions within that church. So it just depends on who that ecclesiastical leader is, and if you feel comfortable talking to them. Sometimes they're not trained to deal with these sort of things, so don't expect them to know all the answers. They most likely don't, but they can be a great source of comfort and help to you. There are so many different tools and resources out there, so many different books and podcasts and support groups. Our support group on Facebook is wonderful, but it might not be the right one for you. You might find something else that is better for you. Again, the videos and the interviews I share with these different survivors give a lot of different tools and resources, and I've linked to a million different books. So hopefully some of those will be helpful to you. The last question I get a lot is, should I report this rape, or should I report the sexual assault or the abuse? That is a really hard one to answer. Because of the fact that 80% of people know their abuser, it's really hard to report. You don't want to hurt that person's life. You don't want people to scrutinize you, right? Like if you report it and it goes to court, your personal character can be under attack by the abuser's defense attorney, right? Like there's so many things to consider when you report, and so many reasons not to report, but let's talk about the reasons you might want to report. First is that you can help protect future victims. I'm so sorry, I don't mean to get emotional, but in speaking with a lot of survivors, many of them regret not reporting because they later found out that there were other victims besides themselves. And they think to themselves, man, if I had reported, this probably wouldn't have happened. And so they wish that they would have done something to stop that person, but they were too embarrassed, or they were ashamed, or they were worried that they were going to be dragged under the bus, or they were worried that people wouldn't believe them. I mean, there's so many reasons that you don't do it, right? But if you want to protect other people and you want to keep someone else from being hurt by that person, report it. And have a victim advocate or a lawyer on your side when you do it. Get help with the reporting process. There is a great article that I'm going to show you here in a second that shows what happens when you report, what the whole process is, and what that looks like, how you do it, what happens with the police, what happens in the legal system, et cetera. It goes through the whole steps. Okay. So before you do it, I highly suggest you look at this website and you get the information, especially because you can always report, but the statute of limitations may be up. So it depends on your state. So it might be too late to file charges if you've waited too long, like as in years. Okay. I think the statute of limitations is a few years for most states, if I remember right. And in many states, if you were a child when it happened, there is no statute of limitations for a lot of the states. So if you were a minor and you're now an adult, in many cases you can still report, and criminal charges can be filed, and you can stop that person from doing it again. And lastly, remember that attempted rape is still a crime. Just because they didn't actually get to do what they wanted to do doesn't mean that it wasn't a crime. You can still report on that. Hopefully that helped answer some of those questions. We're going to now switch over to RAIN's website, rain.org. They're the Rape, Abuse, Incest National Network. They are one of the leading organizations that takes care of sexual assault victims. They're amazing. This is their website. This is their phone number. You can call them anonymously. You can ask questions, but I want to go through their survivor section. So let me now switch over to the desktop so you can see this. All right. So here's RAIN's website. You can see right here, they have a chat option. Their phone number is right there. But this is where I want to show you after sexual assault here, this page. So this is where you can go find what to do with the criminal justice system. And this is some recovering tips of how to recover. So this for survivors section is wonderful. How can, if you want to know about therapy and if you should do therapy, here's some information about that. How can you prevent it from happening again? How do you tell your family about this? Let's say you're a teenager and you want to tell your parents. Oh, how in the world do I do that, right? For a long time, my family didn't know about my date rape. It was really hard to tell them I didn't. I knew it was going to hurt my family. And I didn't want them to hurt, right? I wanted to protect them from it. And especially if you're younger, you need that support. You need that help. So please tell your family. Here's some tips on how you can do that. This section, the self-care, what to do for yourself. Oh my gosh, this section's awesome. Okay. It's really great. It gives some really great resources and tips what to do. If you are the caregiver, someone who's been assaulted, here's some tips and help for you as well. And then this page, like I told you about the reporting of the criminal justice. Look at this. This is awesome. This is how to report. This is, it goes through what you do and who you're going to be talking to. Is there a time limit, right? Like, and then some common questions that they're going to ask you. A lot of your questions will be answered here. This, what to expect from the criminal justice system, what happens after you reported, what happens in a trial. So a lot of those questions are answered here in this section. It's fantastic. RAIN has done such a great job. They talk to thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of rape victims and sexual assault victims. They know how to help you. Okay. If you feel lost and you're just not sure what to do, call the hotline. You can do it anonymously. You can ask your questions and they can help you find help and help direct you towards what to do. The next group I want to show you is the National Domestic Violence Hotline. Okay, this is the hotline.org. Another great resource. They have a texting program, so you can text START to 88788. All right. And when you talk to them, here's what's going to happen. This is why I wanted to show you this page. Okay. So if you call them, this is what you can expect. Okay. They're going to first say to you, thanks for reaching out. Are you in a safe place to talk? Can you talk about this right now? If not, let's get you there. Right. That's the first and foremost concern from them, is if you are safe right now. Okay. And if you're not safe, here's how we get you safe. Okay. So you can kind of see these drop downs kind of talk a little bit more about each of these things. And then they're going to ask about your situation. Okay. And then they're going to help you brainstorm solutions and how to get out, what to do. Okay. I love this part. The fact that they're going to ask you and help you get out of your situation is huge. I want to get back to my PowerPoint real fast to make sure I'm not missing anything. Okay, so yeah, I went through that. So that is, let me stop sharing. That is a lot of information I have thrown at you about what is sexual assault and how to deal with it and how to report and if you should report and things like that. I hope that this was helpful for you. As a way of personal story, I did not report my date rape. I didn't, because at the time I wasn't convinced it was date rape. What happened to me was I was dating a guy and we'd been making out and things had gone a little too far. And I was like, whoa, we've gone too far. And I remember saying to him specifically, I think we need to stop now. Like we've gone too far. And he says to me, and I quote, "You cannot bring me to this point and not let me finish." And I froze. You know, we talk a lot about fight or flight, but no one ever talks about the freeze response. But most people freeze when they're in that situation. If your no is not respected, what do you do when your consent isn't listened to, right? Your no consent, and you freeze a lot of times. And I didn't say anything. And I just sat there like, I didn't know what to do. And by the time he was done, before I could even say anything or do anything, he was done. It was so crazy. And I remember going home to my roommate, and my roommate could say I was white as a ghost. And she was like, "What happened?" And I told her what happened. She's like, "He just raped you. You need to break up with him." I'm like, that wasn't rape. We were making out. I'm dating him. And she's like, no, this is rape. And it took so many people telling me that what happened was rape that I finally, over a few years, started to believe that what happened, because as a good Christian girl, as a girl who grew up in a Christian household, I was taught that you don't even get to that point, right? Like there's morals, and we had gone past that boundary. And I'm like, well, I was complicit. I was making out with them. I was doing things I shouldn't be doing, So I thought that I was complicit in the intercourse, and I wasn't. It was not my fault. Yeah, I needed to accept my own actions and what I did to get there, maybe, right? Like it wasn't good for me to be doing the things I was doing in the first place, but that doesn't mean that it was okay for him to go all the way, right? And that is why this episode for me is so important, because we need to understand consent, and you need to understand that these things are not okay. What happened to you is not okay. And it is traumatizing. But the hope is that you can heal from it. I have healed from it. It took going to therapy for me. You can watch more of my video down below. We'll link it down below, and I'll tell you exactly what I did to heal, and you can hear my healing journey. I won't go into all of that in this episode, but I want you to know that healing is possible. You don't have to stay stuck. You don't have to stay a victim. What happened to you happened to you. It is not who you are. You are not a victim. You were victimized, but you are not a victim. You can move past this, and you can become a survivor and a conqueror. You can take back your power. Oftentimes when this stuff happens to you, you feel powerless. You feel so vulnerable. You feel dirty. You feel violated. You feel gross, so much darkness all around you. But I promise you that if you seek healing, and you go to therapy, you read some books, you talk to people, you process what's happening, you bury what happened to you. You can and will heal. You will move past this. You will no longer be held down by these chains. You will be free. You will be back to the bright light and the amazing person that you are, because you are amazing. You are incredible. You have so many talents and so much worth. I know that right now you feel like you have no worth. You feel like a used $20 bill. My girlfriend, my friend, that $20 bill is still a $20 bill. It's still worth $20. And you're worth more like $1 million. Hold on, let me rephrase that. You have infinite value. You are amazing. God loves you. He made you and he doesn't make mistakes. Just because this happened to you does not mean that you were tainted. And understanding the atonement and understanding what God did for you and what Christ did for you on that cross, that you can be healed. He heals all wounds, not just sin, all wounds. That's what he died for on that cross. Every single hurt can be healed. And I promise that if you seek the healing and you seek the resources, that you will find the answers and you will find the tools and the help that you need. I promise. And if you need a listening ear, if you tried to talk about this to somebody and they didn't believe you, please message me, reach out. I will believe you. And I will help you find the resources that you need to get the help. I've done it for dozens of people so far, and I will continue to doing that, because that is the whole point of this show, is to give help and healing and help people. I love you and God loves you. Thank you for being here, and thank you for watching this video and for sharing it with someone who needs to hear it. God bless.